Australia's two most populous states are this morning dealing with new coronavirus outbreaks, with New South Wales residents being warned it wouldn't take much for them to be in Melbourne's situation. The warning comes as Melburnians have been told it will now be mandatory to wear face masks when going out in public from this Thursday, as the city struggles to deal with a burgeoning number of new COVID-19 outbreaks. Most Victorian school students will also return to remote learning today after an extended mid-year break.
So across the border, health authorities in New South Wales have issued an urgent warning for people who visited the Batemans Bay Soldiers Club last week to immediately get tested for COVID-19. 8 confirmed cases have now been linked to that club, and despite pledging to keep New South Wales open for business, the state government is now advising all residents to wear face masks and to avoid public transport and social gatherings as community cases spread. Let's get more from our reporter Jessie Dorset in Sydney and Elias Kluwer in Melbourne. Elias, I'll start with you. Masks are going to be mandatory in Victoria. How are Melburnians going about stocking up on them?
Yeah, well, Lisa, we saw yesterday people queuing up at chemists trying to get those hospital-grade masks. We saw them even rushing to those fabric stores so they could DIY them. So a lot of people keen to get their hands on some, but the Chief Health Officer, Professor Brett Sutton, has urged people not to panic buy. There's plenty for everyone, so heaps for everyone to go around. And so we'll see a lot more of them, of course, because the advice currently is that you must wear them if you can't socially distance, but it's not effectively mandated. So if you're seen not wearing one now, it'll be a $200 fine. Now, there has been a little bit of confusion as to where you have to wear them, but the Premier Daniel Andrews says it's effectively every public setting. So even in a workplace, if you can socially distance, you must wear a mask. Public transport, even going for a walk, Year 11 and 12 students must wear a mask. As I said, if you're seen not wearing one, it's a $200 fine. There are some exemptions though. Children under 12 will not have to wear a mask, and if you have a legitimate medical reason, you also won't have to wear a mask.
And Victoria is still struggling to contain the outbreak. Really concerning how many cases are turning up in workplaces and especially aged care homes, Elias.
Yeah, that's right. The Premier yesterday said 80% of infections since May have been due to workplace infections, including aged care facilities. There's now 40 separate clusters in aged care facilities. Over 100 staff members at these facilities have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. 93 actual residents. A lot of those now have had to be transferred to hospital for acute care. Now, WorkSafe and police say they'll now be stepping up their checks of workplaces to ensure they're complying by the Chief Health Officer guidelines. They'll be focusing on aged care facilities, but also high-risk workplaces, which they say are call centres, distribution centres, and also abattoirs, which have been the cause of several clusters across Melbourne as well. So if they're seen breaking the rules, they'll be fined $10,000. And just before I go, Lisa, the inquiry into hotel quarantine also begins today, presided over by former Judge Jenny Coates. There'll be no witnesses heard today, but we'll keep a close eye on it before the final report is handed down in September.
Yeah, pretty quick turnaround for that. In Sydney, of course, the numbers we're seeing, 18 cases yesterday, not anywhere as big as Victoria, but still pretty alarming, Jessie. Where are they all coming from?
All over the state, Lisa, particularly here in Sydney. That figure of 18 is the highest number of new infections per day in about 3 months in New South Wales. 13 were locally acquired cases, including a patron at the Holy Duck restaurant in Chippendale on the fringe of Sydney's CBD, where we are this morning. The health authorities here in New South Wales are starting to ramp up their advice as well. They're telling people to wear a mask if they can't socially distance, to reconsider travel if it's not essential, and to stay off the public transport network unless you need to use it. Yesterday, the state's Deputy Chief Health Officer told me it wouldn't take much for New South Wales to end up in Melbourne's situation. So we all have to do our bit to avoid that. An area of particular concern for the authorities this morning is on the state's south coast. The number of cases linked to the Soldiers Club in Batemans Bay has grown overnight to 8, so it's doubled to 8 cases. The advice now is to anyone who was there on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday last week is to self-isolate immediately and get tested. An extra pop-up clinic in Batemans Bay is being set up today to swab as many people as possible. And that's particularly important advice as well for Canberrans, Lisa. The South Coast is a really popular holiday spot for ACT residents.
Yeah, for sure. Jesse and Elias, thanks for keeping us up to date this morning. In other news, the federal government will continue to back unsecured loans for small businesses for another 9 months. It's also expanding the scheme to offer similar guarantees for loans of up to $1 million for small and medium-sized businesses that might be wanting to expand or adapt during the COVID-19 outbreak. The Commonwealth has already guaranteed 50% of new unsecured loans for more than 15,000 businesses. The future of other government support measures, though, well, that's going to be revealed later this week, and we are going to speak to the Treasurer very shortly. An Aboriginal community near Uluru says it has support to close the tourist destination if interstate flights resume at the nearby airport. The Mutijula Community Aboriginal Corporation says restarting direct flights from Victoria and New South Wales to the Ayers Rock Airport next month would pose an unacceptable health risk to local residents. The corporation says it has the support of the Central Land Council and Uluru's management board to shut the park.
The global coronavirus death toll has passed 600,000 following another record day for new confirmed cases and deaths. The United States tops the list with more than 3.7 million cases and 140,000 deaths. But President Donald Trump has dismissed figures from Johns Hopkins University that conclude America has the 7th highest mortality rate in the world.
I think it's the opposite. I think we have one of the lowest mortality rates in the world. We're going to take a look.
We had 900 deaths on a single day.
We will take a look.
This week.
Ready?
You can check it out.
Could you please get me the mortality rate? Yeah. Kaylee.
As Dr. Burks points out, and this is
Number one low mortality rate.